light switch. A warm welcome to all and much excitement. I hope many of you take advantage of having Broadside right on site and take home one or two of the truly gorgeous and sustaining books by tonight's poets. If you're new to our series, there's a sign up there to receive our twice yearly series flyer and also email reminders if you'd like. A few quick announcements of upcoming local poetry events. At the Forbes Library tomorrow night, Wednesday, November 2nd, 7 p.m., Daniel Mahoney and A. Loudermilk, which should be a wonderful reading, and alas, it's up against another wonderful reading down at Broadside at the same time, Margaret Zamowski, Jeffrey Levine, and Patricia Fargnoli, and I'm going to be running up and down the hill to try to go to both of them. This coming Sunday, yes, the Jubilat series continues, 3 p.m. at the Jones Library in Amherst, Mary Jo Salter and Rebecca Wolfe. The Jacobson Center for Writing has a Working Writers series, and on Wednesday, November 7th, something's wrong with the dates here. I just said Sunday, November 6th, and Wednesday, November 7th. Email me if you're confused, because I'm confused. But Madeline Blaze will be talking on the biographical profile. The Yale Younger Prize-winning poets Lauren Goodman and Michael Casey will be at Amherst Books at 8 p.m. on Friday, November 11th. Okay, now we get to be here now. Thanks are due first to the Smith College Lecture Committee for their support of this reading and of many of our programs. We're very, very grateful for their assistance, without which we could not continue on the scale that we sort of established and don't want to retreat from. We're happy tonight to honor Jack Gilbert, who has made the Valley home base for quite a while, and to celebrate his new book, Refusing Heaven. And we're very happy to have occasioned Linda Gregg's return to Northampton, where she made her home some 15 years ago, or for 15 years, a decade or so ago. As many of you may know, Linda and Jack have a very special relationship. They were partners many, many years ago, and they have remained close, close friends over a great expanse of time and distance. And I told them not to touch the mic, and I just did. Linda Gregg's work rings with the musicality of lived experience, of having traveled where her poems lead and offering back an electric and intimate account of those journeys. With energy and insight drawn from, rather than brought to, the exploration of the inscrutable and the inconsolable, she works through grief and solitude with radiant dignity and quiet public grace. And she offers us startling, clean revelations that seem to emanate not so much from an unknowable region of faith as from a kind of fully alive knowing, an availability to and acceptance of meaning, whatever that means. It is this earth that all meaning is, and it is here that God lives, and the way we make love with each other is the collision that makes his face shine. Gregg is the recipient of a Guggenheim Fellowship, a National Endowment for the Arts grant, a Whiting Writers Award, and several pushcart prizes. Her work has appeared in the New Yorker, the Paris Review, Kenyon, Atlantic Monthly, and she has taught at the University of Iowa, Columbia, Princeton, the University of California at Berkeley. She lives right now in New York City. Her work inspires extravagant and well-deserved praise from the most distinguished poets. Linda Gregg brings us back to poetry, says Gerald Stern. She is original and mysterious, one of the best poets in America. A judgment echoed by Czeslaw Milosz. I consider Linda Gregg one of the best American poets. Or consider these words of Joseph Brodsky's. The blinding intensity of Miss Gregg's lines stains the reader's psyche the way lightning or heartbreak do. Linda Gregg writes of the heart knowing its truth, and of the harpoon of the mind wedged in us, shaping. We are grateful for her knowing heart and shaping mind, and welcome her back in our midst. Linda Gregg.
Um, I want to thank Smith College and the Poetry Center here for bringing me. Someone today at the Q&A said that they felt gratitude, and it was a kind of a essential feeling for them, for her as a poet, and I feel gratitude to be here. And also I felt coming on the train a curiosity. I didn't know whether I would be extremely upset or happy. When coming up here on the train, until I saw the river. Richard O'Brien and I, Richard rode on a whole tree, standing on top of a tree going down the wild Connecticut. I have a lot of memories, 1,000 memories. I'm also deeply grateful to be here in the same day, the same evening as Jack Gilbert, that we're still alive. Here, I'm very happy about that. It could be different, believe me, for either one of us. So I am going to read just a few poems from my earlier books, and then some poems from the book that I just finished writing that will be out at the end of March. Okay, I'll read two very short poems. Classicism. The nights are very clear in Greece. When the moon is round, we see it completely and have no feeling. These are all from Greece, and I have a friend here, besides Jack, a friend Donald Brees, who's been living in Greece even more years than I have. But between the three of us, it's a long time. At home. Far is where I am near. Far is where I live. My house is in the far. The night is still. A dog barks from a farm. A tiny dog not far below. The bark is soft and small. A lamp keeps the stars away. If I go out there, they are. I think about place. Those two poems were in Greece, and in fact, that poem was written in a shepherd's house that Donald gave to me, way up in the mountains. And this poem, in terms of place, is from my childhood, where I grew up in Western Marin, way out in the country. It's called The Apparent. When I say transparency, I don't mean seeing through. I mean the way a symbol is made when an X is drawn over O, as the world moves when it is named, in the sense of truth by consciousness, which we translate as opposites. The space we breathe is also called distance. Presence gives, absence allows and calls, until presence holds the invisible weeping. Transparent in the way the heart sees old leaves, as we become more like the hills by feeling. I mean permanence, as when the deer and I regard each other, Ah, there was no fear then, when she went with her young from the meadow, back into the nearly night of the woods. It was because the rain came down suddenly harder. And finally, this is a poem from New York City. It's about a homeless women's shelter. Lies and longing. Half the women are asleep on the floor on pieces of cardboard. One is face down under a blanket with her feet and ankle bracelet showing. Her spear leans against the wall by her head where she can reach it. The woman who sits on a chair won't speak because this is not her dress. An old woman sings an Italian song in English and says she wants her name in lights. Faye Runaway tells about her grown children. One asks for any kind of medicine. One says she has a rock that means honor and a piece of fur. One woman's feet are wrapped in rags. One keeps talking about how fat she is so nobody will know she's pregnant. They lie about getting letters. One lies about a beautiful dead man. One lies about Denver. Outside it's 30th Street and hot and no sun. Well, this is actually another poem from Greece, and it's makes me feel like thanking Donald because it's from the same shepherd's house up in the mountains. It's called Glistening. As I pull the bucket from the crude well, the water changes from dark to a light more silver than the sun. When I pour it over my body that is standing in the dust by the oleander bush, it sparkles easily in the sunlight with an earnestness like the spirit close up. The water magnifies the sun all along the length of it. Love is not less because of the spirit. Delight does not make the heart childish. We thought the blood thinned, our weight lessened, that our substance was reduced by simple happiness. The oleander is thick with leaves and flowers because of spilled water. Let the spirit marry the heart. When I return naked to the stone porch, there is no one to see me glistening. But I look at the almond tree with its husks cracking open in the heat. I look down the whole mountain to the sea. Goats bleating faintly and sometimes bells. I stand there a long time with the sun and the quiet, the earth moving slowly as I dry in the light. I like to tell this little story about this poem because this book, chosen by the Lion, is very much about passion and love. And a friend came to me and said, well, at least you wrote one poem in this book that wasn't about romantic love and passion. And, well, the funny thing is that it is about passion. So I just thought it was really funny. Anyway, it's called The Wait. Two horses were put together in the same paddock, night and day. In the night and in the day, wet from heat and the chill of the wind on it. Muzzle to water, snorting, head swinging, and the taste of bay in the shadowed air. The dignity of being. They slept that way, knowing each other always. Withers quivering for a moment, fetlock and the proud rise at the base of the tail, width of back, the volume of them and each other's weight. Fences were nothing compared to that. People were nothing. They slept standing, their throats curved against the other's rump. They breathed against each other, whinnied and stomped. There are things they did that I do not know. The privacy of them had a river in it, had our universe in it, and the way its border looks back at us with its light. This was finally their freedom, the freedom an oak tree knows, that is built at night by stars. And this poem was written in Java, where I was told by a paranormal to go and rescue my heart. Which of course I obeyed. And went all the way from Batu to Yogyakarta and went to a beach, and then the rest is this poem. Alone. Yes, it's really a luxury to be able to be a fool for love, it's a kind of luxury. Alone with the goddess. The young men ride their horses fast on the wet sand of Pangaritis, back and forth, with the water sliding up to them and away. This is the sea where the goddess lives, angry, her lover taken away. Don't wear red, don't wear green here, the people say. Do not swim in the sea. Give her an offering. I give a coconut to protect the man I love. The water pushes it back. I wade out and throw it farther. The goddess does not accept your gift, an old woman says. I say, perhaps she likes me, and we are playing a game. The old woman is silent. The horses wear blinders of cloth. The young men exult in their bodies, not seeing right or left, pretending to be brave, sliding on and off their beautiful horses on the wet beach at Pangaritis. These are some poems in this new book that's about to come out. And this poem, actually, I lived in for half a year in a West Texas town called Marfa. And this is a poem from that place called Purity. I'm walking on Farm Road 2810 again, alone as always, unless you want to count the border patrol or the police cars that go by with their strange maneuvers in front of me and pull off into the mowed grass on the side, then turn and come back, stalling and facing me, waiting until a car approaches from far away. It passes and the police follow it toward town, leaving me with animals, insects, and birds, and the silence. I walk toward the sun, which is always going down. This poem actually takes me back to a source, the very first years that I knew Jack when I was 19 and got lucky. but I mean, it was the time, you know. This was 1962 in the Haight-Ashbury. This was very sweet, you know, the Flower Children, Joplin and all that. So this is a poem that goes back to my girl, young womanness. It's called Staying After. I grew up with horses and poems when that was the time for that. Then Ginsberg and Orlovsky in the Fillmore West, when everybody was dancing. I sat in the balcony with my legs pushed through the railing, watching Janis Joplin sing. Women have houses now and children. I live alone in a kind of luxury. I wake when I feel like it, read what Rilke wrote to Svetaeva. At night I watch the apartments whose windows are still lit after midnight. I fell in love. I believed people. And even now I love the yellow light shining down on the dirty brick wall. This poem, I've been living in New York City, so that poem was written in New York City, and so this one was too. So, it's called Getting Value. My elderly friend of many years arrived last winter at my door with his nose dripping onto the floor and shaking so hard you could hear his teeth clatter. It was hard to get his clothes off and him onto the sofa bed in my living room, filling me with memories of what he used to be, what the French call monsters, like Rodin. His poetry is deeper now, bigger and more tender than ever. We wonder about the newness of the old and how much is missing. He forgets names and directions. Surely there is a hollowing out, but how much that is left is more than the past was. The Shakespeare who stopped writing, and the crippled Leonardo. What about our very old God, who is now making his problematical children? This poem is actually back in Marfa, Texas, but I just want to mention that I'm comparing it to all the, say, 8 years that I lived on Greek islands. So there's a kind of thinking about the difference between being in that huge desert close to Mexico and all those years in Greece. It's called As Is. Pay attention. Talk to no one unless you are buying food or borrowing a book or asking for directions to the border or the canyon or the river with a pool. Always formal. Poor with poor. It's not the same here. No Greek ruins. No fragment with legs of walking horses painted delicately on it. No part of a lion on bits of a glazed vase. Like a code to tell of the world they knew would be destroyed. Here there is no need. The rabbit's groin is ripped open on the road. When you find a bird's wing, there is a flattened small bird attached. a ranch at evening, the sun leaving, antelope standing and the other birds flying, all of it meaning the same thing. When Jack and I lived on a road, and we actually lived on a town called Lindos way back before there were foreigners there, or at least only about 6 foreigners. We used to go occasionally on a bus between Rhodes and Lindos, and there actually really was a town filled with insane people. I was told why, but I don't know if it's true, so I won't tell you what they said. But this poem is called The Problem of Sentences. A sentence is an idea with urgency, a feeling for the sun before it rises. The imagination loves the wall of a building, loves the floor and the square window that looks out on it. The scent of jasmine is how the plant climbs up the wall built by the Knights of Rhodes. But the sentence stresses the meaning, making us notice an unruly jasmine against the orderly stone wall. We say our bus went down through the village of the insane, or that the eucalyptus trees were tall, that we saw a man dragging a big branch. The sun will return, whether you smile or cry, clap or burn candles. But when I say whether, the sentence may be thinking, even so. Also from Texas, The Presence in Absence. Poetry is not made of words. I can say it's January when it's August. I can say the scent of wisteria on the second floor of my grandmother's house with the door open onto the porch in Petaluma, while I'm living an hour's drive from the Mexican border town of Ojinaga. It is possible to be with someone who is gone, like the silence which continues here in the desert while the night train passes through Marfa, louder and louder, like the dogs whining and barking after the train is gone. Searching for the poem. 1. The boat of the Bible was pushed into the reeds. Our chanting is the stolen property of the sea. Bathing is our clothing, is the mountain I see in you. I walk up in the heat to remember its weight, which has something to do with it. We are struck dumb by what we call truth, having to match the foreignness of stone. Our speech is far from the click and shift of broken glass, making the new colored pictures we try to memorize in our sleep. We are strengthened even by defeat, honoring most what is strangest among us. 2. I'm standing with a tree while the sun rises, proud of the night. She pushes the infant into the reeds to keep the secret. using language for imitation, to keep the mountain of the beloved. I walk up the mountain in the heat to no belief. The glass image shifts and clicks in our sleep, changes into another mystery to turn the pages. Three, the thing we are trying to say is in the language of leaves. We take our chanting from the sea and clothe ourselves in the instruments of water. We can never speak its language. In the book they made a boat of our reeds to hide the child. We go down and forth, proud to live with the night. We walk up the mountain to relearn the weight, to keep inside the beloved. When we sleep, the universe shifts and clicks. We memorize each new image and hide it for safety. For our chanting, get as close as possible without knowing. Draw it with a stick. I'll read 3 more poems. This one also was written in Greece, but for those of you who've read my books, you know that many poems were written on Greek islands, and I don't know, I see myself always walking to the mountain of the goddess and young and strong and believing and seeing a kind of size and sacredness. I still do, but this poem is different. It was like the last time I was there, and it's in a way dirtier, like, you know, like a fashion person would say. It's green, but it's a dirty green. Always alone. There was a place. It was not important. A narrow street next to the sea in the town where I waited for the bus to take me back up to my house on top of the mountain. I would buy a bottle of water and sit on the step across from the wharf in the shade if I was lucky. I watched a beaten-up fishing boats tied to the pier. The fishermen sold their catch alongside, or sat idle on the decks, sometimes cooking on small grills. Mostly I looked away to another mountain where I felt the goddess used to be, where I walk so often in her absence, finding ancient shards, negotiating for my soul with the leftover facts of the earth, reconciling with what love is, always alone. Usually it was evening and I would be tired. I would watch the boats, hear the Aegean, consider the mountain that I had been intimate with. Sometimes I would take a fragment from my bag and spit on it, or splash on the last of my drinking water to see if anything was there. Maybe a piece of the classical black glaze, or the shadow of a flower, maybe even part of a maiden. In the pleasure of the whole thing, still a secret. And then one little one, and then one from Chosen by the Lion. This is a New York poem. It's called Bamboo and a Bird. In the subway late at night, waiting for the downtown train at 42nd Street, walking back and forth on the platform, too tired to give money, staring at the magazine covers in the kiosk. Someone passes me from behind, wearing an orange vest and dragging a black hose. A car stops and the doors open. All the faces are plain. It makes me happy to be among these people who leave empty seats between each other. And then I'll just end with this poem from, the last poem from Chosen by the Lion. It's called Let Birds. Eight deer on the slope in the summer morning mist, the night sky blue. Me like a mare led out to pasture. The Tao does not console me. I was given the way in the milk of childhood, breathing it, waking and sleeping. But now there is no amazing smell of sperm on my thighs, no spreading it on my stomach to show pleasure. I will never give up longing. I will let my hair stay long. The rain proclaims these trees. The trees tell of the sun. Let birds, let birds, let leaf be passion, let jaw, let teeth, let tongue be between us, let joy, let entering, let rage and calm join, let quail come, let winter impress you, let spring, allow the lost ocean to waken you. Let the mare in the field in the summer morning mist make you whinny, make you come to the fence and whinny. Let birds. Thank you.
Probably no one noticed, but first I have to say, Linda, thank you particularly for reading that last poem, which is one of my favorites. And it was just spectacular to hear the new work. And I would have said that there's a new book coming out. Do we know the title? In the Middle Distance. And some of you might have noticed that I was a little distressed as I was introducing Linda, and it's because I suddenly said, how is it I'm getting to the end of the introduction? Others of you might have been thinking, oh, thank goodness, a short one for a change. But I stapled them together wrong, so we lost a whole page. And, and it's fine, the poems stand and speak for themselves, but I would have quoted Lucy Rock-Broido and W.S. Merwin and many other people. And I did just want to say that one of the things that strikes me most is about how desire and longing are so lucidly observed and so given to us with such luminary grace in Linda's poems, that they're as monumental and as sacred as joy and fulfillment are. And the other thing that I did want to say is that the poem Precision from Things in Flesh, she speaks of silence, the silence inside lust's thundering. And I just want to put out there that this also, to me, aptly describes her own poems. There is a directness and equipoise in the fervor, just as the greatest turmoil has precision. So thank you, Linda. I'll try to get this one right. The work of Jack Gilbert is both a rebellious assertion of the call to clarity and a profound affirmation of the world in all its aspects. Within the precise and tightly controlled boundaries of the page, his stoic vision and solitary labor produce a poetry of integrity that is also deeply expressive, deeply human. Of his vision, the New York Times writes, "Life and death are not opposites in this conception of things. They partake of each other. Together, they are the spirit." Jack Gilbert's first volume of poems, Views of Jeopardy, received the Yale Younger Poets Award in 1962 and was nominated for the Pulitzer Prize. The nomination of a young poet's first book for the Pulitzer is remarkable enough, but consider that in 1962, one of the other nominated books was by Robert Frost, after a silence of 12 years, and another was by William Carlos Williams, who had just died. Williams won. Monolithos Poems, 1962 and 1982, also nominated for a Pulitzer, was awarded the Stanley Kunitz Prize for the American Poetry and the American Poetry Review Prize. In a review of that book, poet David St. John praised the author for the stoniest and most aesthetic romanticism in American poetry. I've always loved that quote. The Great Fires, poems 1982 to 92, remain true to the sparse concrete style that has always distinguished Jack's work. The poems are audacious, harsh, honest, heartbreakingly tender and wise. Deep of thought, spare of word, he achieves what Kenneth Rexroth described as authentic poetic utterance. I looked back at my introduction of Jack when he was Conkling Poet here in 1999. And I couldn't help borrowing this bit for tonight. Quoting myself. "I don't know what possessed me, because certainly Jack Gilbert is about the most un-Amazon.com poet alive. But I looked up the customer comments on The Great Fires. I expected fervent praise, even reverence, but the form that it took made me feel a little better that day about the internet." From Austin, Texas, buy this book. Read it closely. The poems will make you strong. And from Calcasa, Michigan, this book does what all others fail to do. It makes us live. As James Dickey wrote, Gilbert takes himself away to a place more inward than is safe to go. From that awful silence and tightening, he returns to us poems of savage compassion. Linda used that word savage today in the Q&A. In his long-awaited and eagerly anticipated new book, Refusing Heaven, Gilbert writes about the commingled passion, loneliness, and sometimes surprising happiness of a life spent in luminous understanding of his own blessings and shortcomings. With masterful reserve and deep patience, he infuses the everyday in its struggles and delights with a clarity of vision that casts shadows on lightness and brings illumination to the dimly unconsidered. Jack's unique gift was recognized early, and he's gone on to receive prestigious awards and been published in many anthologies and journals such as The New Yorker and the American Poetry Review, but not through any exertions of his own. His focus has never been on putting his poems into the world, but on writing them, on being the poem, on living the life. Born in Pittsburgh, educated there and in San Francisco, Jack has lived most of his life under the radar, off the beaten path, on the move, but slowly, paying careful attention to wherever he happens to be. With extended intervals in New York City, San Francisco, Northampton, Japan, he has spent much of his adult life on Greek islands, managing a scraped existence where the world is announced by the smell of oregano and sage in rocky places high up. He lives in his poem, Searching for Pittsburgh, where his tomatoes grow. In this happy place my serious heart has made. Jack has been back in Western Massachusetts for about 15 years, a national treasure quietly walking the streets of Northampton. He needs no further accolades. Well, he's never needed accolades. But I am pleased to say that after a little arm twisting, he has accepted the invitation to be the next Poet Laureate of Northampton and will be installed for a 2-year term in January. just as an aside, I'd like to thank the Northampton Arts Council for establishing the position of Poet Laureate and continuing to support it. As one of the members of the nominating committee put it, I first discovered the work of Jack Gilbert when a sophomore at Smith College. Being introduced to his work was what made me, as a young person, understand in my bones that poetry matters. He doesn't need higher visibility, but poetry does, and we need Jack Gilbert's poetry. His poems offer us the farthest thing from florid sunsets or hollow mental constructions. They offer us just the right stone, the hard, striated thought we have been needing to turn over in our hands, our hearts. Thank you, Jack, for a life well lived and a lifetime of poetry.
That was lovely. I wish it was true. Don Giovanni on his way to hell. The oxen have voices, the flowers are wounds. You never recover from Tuscany dunes. They cripple with beauty and butcher with love. Sing folly, sing flee, sing going down. The moon is corroding, the deer have gone lame, but you never escape the incurably sane, uncrippled by beauty, unbutchered by love. Sing folly, flee, sing going down. Now it rains in your bowels, it rains though you weep. With terrible tameness, it rains in your sleep and cripples with beauty and butchers with love. You never recover, you never escape, and you mustn't endeavor to find the mistake that cripples with beauty, that butchers as love. Sing folly, sing flee, sing going down. Sing maidens in towns. Oh, maidens in towns. Folly, flee, sing going down. On growing old in San Francisco, two girls barefoot walking in the rain. Both girls lovely, one of them is sane. Hurting me softly, hurting me though. Two girls barefoot, two girls barefoot walking in the snow. Walking in the white snow, walking in the black. Two girls barefoot, never coming back. A brief for the defense. Sorrow everywhere, slaughter everywhere. If babies are not starving one place, they are starving somewhere else, with flies in their nostrils. But we enjoy our lives because that's what God wants. Otherwise, the moanings before summer's dawn would not be made so fine. The Bengal tiger would not be fashioned so miraculously well. The poor women at the fountain are laughing together between the suffering they have known and the awful things in their future, smiling and laughing while somebody in the village is very sick. There is laughter every day in the terrible streets of Calcutta, and the women laugh in the cages of Bombay. If we deny our happiness, resist our satisfaction, resist our satisfaction, whatever. If we deny our happiness, resist our satisfaction, we lessen the importance of their deprivation. We must risk delight. We can do without pleasure, but not delight, not enjoyment. We must have the stubbornness to accept our gladness in the ruthless furnace of this world. To make injustice the only measure of our attention is to praise the devil. If the locomotive of the Lord runs us down, we should give thanks that the end had magnitude. We must admit there will be music despite everything. We stand at the prow again of a small ship, anchored late at night in the tiny port, looking over to the sleepy island. The waterfront is three shuttered cafe and one naked light burning. To hear the faint sound of oars in the silence as a rowboat comes slowly out and then goes back is truly worth all the years of sorrow, all the years of sorrow that are to come. By small and small, in the old bad days, the other bad days, when they were torturing people, and they would put them on the rack and roll it, and each time they'd roll it, it stretched the body more. And if you still didn't answer, they said, and they did it by short and short, little by little. By small and small, midnight to 4 a.m. For 11 years, I have regretted it. For 11 years, I have regretted it. Regretted that I did not do what I wanted to do as I sat there those 4 hours watching her die. I wanted to crawl in among the machinery and hold her in my arms, knowing the elementary leftover bit of her mind would dimly recognize it was me carrying her to. The bit of her mind which would dimly recognize it was me carrying her to where she was going. Failing and flying. Linda's in this one. Everyone forgets that Icarus also flew. It's the same when love comes to an end, or the marriage fails, and people say they knew it. It was a mistake that everybody said would never work. That she was old enough to know better. But anything worth doing is worth doing badly. Like being there by that summer ocean, on the other side of the island, while love was fading out of her. The stars burning so extravagantly those nights that anybody could tell you knew they would never last. Every morning she was asleep in my bed, like a visitation. The gentleness in her, like cantaloupe standing in the midst each morning. I watched her come back. I watched her coming back through the hot, stony field after swimming. The sea light behind her, and the huge sky on the other side of that. Listening to her while we ate, we ate lunch. How can they say the marriage failed. Like the people who came back from Provence, when it was Provence, and said, "It was pretty, but the food was greasy." I believe Icarus was not fit. I believe Icarus was not failing as he fell, but just coming to the end of his trumpet. Pewter. Pewter is one of the only two things that exists that expands as they get cold. You'll need that one day. I do, I can. Pewter. The thrush is flying under the lake. Nightingales singing underground. Yes, my king. Paris, hungry and leisurely just after the war. Yes. America falling into history. Yes. Those silent winter afternoons along the Seine when I was always alone. Yes, my king. Rain everywhere in the forests of Pennsylvania as the king's coach lumbered and was caught, and all stood gathered close while the black trees went on and on. Ah, my king, it was the sweet time of our lives. The rain shining on their faces, the loud sound of rain around. Like the nights we waited, knowing she was probably warm and moaning under someone else. That cold mansard looking out over the huge hospital of the poor and far down on Paris, gray and beautiful under the February rain. Between that and this, that yes and this yes, between my king, that forgotten girl, forgotten pain, and the consequence. Those lovely, long ago night bills that I did not notice grow more and more apparent in me, like pewter expanding as it cools. Yes, like a king halted in the great forest of Pennsylvania, like me singing these prison songs to praise the gray, to praise her, to tell of me, yes, and of you, my king. Finding something. I say moon, its horses in the tempered dark, because horse is the closest I can get to it. I sit on the terrace of this worn villa the king's telegrapher built, on the mountain that looks down on a blue sea and the small white ferry that crosses slowly to the next island each noon. Michiko is dying in the house behind me. The long windows open so I can hear the faint sound she will make when she wants watermelon to suck, or so I can take her to a bucket in the corner of the high ceiling room, which is the best we can do for a chamber pot. She will lean against my leg as she sits, so as not to fall over in her weakness. How strange and fine to get so near to it. The ashes of her feet are like voices of children calling in the grove of lemon trees, where my heart is as helpless as crushed birds. Put her in the fields for kindness. The door was in the whitewashed 8-foot walls of the narrow back street common to Greek islands. Beautiful light and shade in the clear air. The big iron bolt was on the outside, locking someone in. Some days, the pounding inside made the heavy wooden door shudder. Often, a voice screaming. The crazy old women, people said. She would hurt the children if we let her out. Pinch them or scare them, they said. Sometimes everything was still, and I would delay until I heard the tiny whimper that meant she knew I was there. Late one afternoon, on my way for oil, the door was broken. She was in the lot opposite, in weeds by the wall, her dress pulled up, pissing, like a cow, able to manage, quiet in the last light. More than 60. This is the last one. Out of money, so I'm sitting in the shade of my farmhouse, cleaning the lentils. Cleaning the lentils I found in the back of the cupboard. Listening to the cicada in the fig tree, mixed with the cooing doves on the roof. I look up when I hear a goat hurt far down the valley and discover the sea exactly the same blue I hues